I tend to use a lot of flowers and make a lot of girly pages, but this month we are switching things up. I have designed a brand new workshop, 6 pages, all focused on masculine pages, pages that are perfect for the boys and the men in your life. They are a little extra rugged, a little extra distressed, but lots of fun texture and patterns that could be used for all kinds of themes. I love this graph paper here. It's a perfect place to house some journaling. So you can definitely put the story in with your pages. You can see we have distressing along the edges here with sanding. We have distressing with ink around the edges of the pattern papers. More sanding here for this dark pattern so it stands out from the background. And definitely some fun treatments for the gears. This is a new set, Gears and Textures, which is launching January 6th, as well as the paper, which is called Nature Walk, and it's also launching January 6th. So just right around the corner if you are watching this right when I am putting it out. I knew as soon as I saw this paper that I had to make some pages with it. So let's go ahead and have a quick look at the papers. So this is probably my favorite paper pack out of the entire catalog. It is just so beautiful. These deep, rich colors. This is called Nature Walk, and it will work perfectly with outdoor photos, but there's no strong theme to it. You can see there's no really themey elements. There's not pictures of trees or mountains or anything like that. So it can be used for so many different types of themes. This paper launches January 6th. I will have it linked down below for you. And on January 6th, bonus days start, which means you can earn extra coupons for every $60 you spend. And then in February, you can spend those coupons. This is on top of your 10% Stampin' Rewards. Plus, there is a new product of the month, which you can get for $5 when you spend $100. I also use these faux bronze pentagons for this workshop. They were a perfect embellishment to go along with all the gears. Here is the second layout. You can see I'm still going for those dark blue colors. I really loved those dark patterns in this pack. I thought it would pop really nicely with the metallics. And of course, the text paper is one of my favorites. Here is a look at kind of the star of this show, which is the gears and textures, the stamps, and the dies. I think they work perfectly together. I really brought in a lot of stamping on this layout, as well as the third layout, which I haven't shown you yet. But you could see all of this is stamped texture and mostly all one color of ink. I switched up the colors for my title piece here. That title is from another new stamp set called Exploring Nature. There's some really good titling options in here, and I loved how this took up kind of like a really big spot on my page. And I tried to go for titles that were generic enough that you could do all kinds of pages with them and you wouldn't be too limited. You may have noticed on the first page that I had brought in this sort of like ticket shape. This is actually from a set that came out in the Christmas release. This is the branching out dies, and I used the smallest one as kind of like a ticket or a tag shape. But unlike a tag, you don't need to put any twine or anything through it. So I thought that was nice. I have one there, and a couple layered up over here. I did some distressing on the edge with sanding, and then I decided to bring in quite a bit of ink, especially on these ones. I really went dark on the ink on the edge using the early Espresso color. But you can see that bit of distressing from the sanding block. I have 2 different kinds of sanding blocks that I like to use. This is a Tim Holtz one. It has a nice big flat area, or like a nail buffer. Either of those will work. You can also use like a fine grit one that you get from like the hardware store. I do like some form of block though, so that you get a nice flat surface. Sometimes if you're just using sandpaper, it can go kind of wonky because you push harder in some areas than others, and this keeps it kind of flat and even. I definitely did a lot of stamping on this layout. This piece here is stamped as well. It's the same stamp that's used over here. And then I did more of that stamping on the background over here. I kept it kind of tone on tone because I didn't want it to really stand out. I wanted it to be more of a subtle background element that didn't steal the show, but just kind of added to that messy, grungy feel of the pages. For this journaling circle, I brought in the Stylish Shapes dies. These have a little like piercing detail around the outside, and those are the same circle dies that I used for these circles on my first layout. Can't really see the piercing detail too much because it's such dark paper, and then I sanded the edge, but there's a good assortment of sizes in this die set. You could use any circle dies that you have. That was just one that I had handy. I want to show you the different treatments that I did on these gears. You could see here I have gold foil, and I also have the earthen toned metallic. And interesting, this is kind of like a bronzy color. When you sand it, you expose more of a silver color. So you end up with a little bit of silver, which I think works really good. And you don't have to sand hard on these metallic papers to expose the white or the silver underneath. I also have some stamping that I embossed with a custom mix of embossing powders. Now, if you want to see how these come together, just keep watching, and I'm going to show you also how to kind of layer up these stamps and make it a little bit easier. If you want to get the full cutting guide that shows you all the details, all the measurements, the close-up photos, gives you tips and tricks. You can grab that by placing an order during January on my Stampin' Up website of $80 or more before tax and shipping, and then I will just automatically email that out to you after your order is placed. Or if you're thinking you want to join Stampin' Up, you can join my team and get all of my guides, current and past guides, for free. Now, for my crafty friends that don't live in Canada, you can actually purchase this guide from my website. I will go ahead and put the link down in the description box. Just click the see more below the video, and then there will be a link down there where you can go purchase the guide. Okay, let's get a little bit messy here, and I'm going to show you how to put these gears together. So to make these, you are going to need some metallic papers. I have gold foil paper here and the earthen tone metallic. You could use different shades like silvers, gunmetal colors. I really liked the warmer colors because there's a lot of brown in the paper that I used, in the ink that I used, and so I wanted to stay just with the warmer tones. I have a little bit of silver here and there, but the majority of it is warmer colors. These are just gorgeous papers. I have used both of those a lot on all kinds of projects. And then some black cardstock. I would recommend the two-tone cardstock from Stampin' Up because it does have a white core. And so when you sand it, you get that white poking through and it looks really cool. And I will be utilizing that aspect of it. So I took the Gears and Textures dies and I went ahead and cut some pieces here so I can show you. We have this ring, this big gear, this little gear, and then this one here. Those are the pieces that get cut out with the dies. There's also in the stamp set, there are 2 different sizes of gears that you can stamp and then die cut, and they do have coordinating dies, and I'll show you those in a second. I also, on the layout that I have not shown you yet, I used these 2 pieces. So there are some longer pieces in here, and I cut this chain link out of the earthen tone metallic, and then I cut this one out of black cardstock. Now, what I didn't realize until I started playing with this set is that these layer up to make like a layered gear. So you can use these pieces separately, and I have used this smaller gear quite a bit on its own, but you can also layer all 3 pieces together and it gives you that dimensional, a little bit more dimensional gear. You can also put together, this gear here is the stamped one that has the coordinating die, and it matches this. So you can layer that one over top. So this is a die, this is the stamp with coordinating die. And so you can get some fun different looks that way as well. Those are a couple things I didn't realize until I started playing with this set. All right, so to distress these, super easy, both for the gold and for the earthen toned metallic. I'm just gonna grab my sanding block, and you don't wanna go too hard at this at first because it will sand up very easily, like it really scratches up quickly, but I want to keep it going all in the same direction. You could go different ways if you want to. I like the look of it all going in the same direction. You can see that didn't take much, and look how distressed that looks. Pretty cool, right? So then I'm gonna do the same thing on my 3 layers. Just sand those up. And then all there really is to do is to grab your glue and glue your layers together. I do like to wipe off, whether you have like a cloth or a piece of paper, paper towel, something, and just wipe the residue. Anytime that you are sanding, you're going to get color residue coming off of that, sanding dust. And so it's a good idea to wipe that off so that you're not getting like your glue having trouble sticking because there's like loose particles from the dust. All right, now once that's on, we're going to stick this middle part on. I just love how fun these are to layer up. You could definitely play around and like do different combinations, maybe make 1 layer black, switch it up and, you know, just play with different colors, layering them together. For my workshop, I kept it pretty simple. I'll use the same color. For giving instructions, it's just a little bit easier that way. So there is the completed gear, which is really fun, and I just love how easy that is to distress. Now I'm going to do the gold foil as well. This exposes the white that is underneath. And for a lot of these pieces, on both the first layout and the third layout, which I haven't shown you yet, I wanted to add something extra to them. And so I took some black embossing powder and just added a little extra grunge to them. And I'm gonna show you that right now. So I'm just gonna wipe off the little bit of dust that's on top of that. I like to catch my embossing folder with a little coffee filter, and I just grabbed whatever black I had in my stash. Stampin' Up has sets of embossing powders that have all the basic colors in them, which would be perfect if you don't have these colors. And then you're going to need a sticky ink like Versamark. And I don't want to coat the whole thing. I'm just gonna kind of lightly tap this in a couple of areas because I don't want to turn this black. I just want some speckling over top to kind of grunge it up a little bit. So I'm lightly gonna tap this over. And wherever there's no sticky ink, it's not going to hold on. So you don't need to worry about that. But you can see how that is looking. And of course, this is not permanent until you heat it. So I have my heat tool here, and I'm just going to let my heat tool warm up and then bring it to it and just warm it up, and you'll see it melt. And if there's any kind of like harsh lines or you don't like how it looks, you can knock some off before you heat set it, just to make sure nothing looks like really crisp lines. We want this to look organic. Now with the heat embossing, you don't want to heat it too long, just until it melts. You can see it go shiny and look kind of liquidy, then you know that it is melted. And that's all there is to that. You could also do that on this color. I just felt like I wanted some difference between them, and I only did that on my gold ones. Now same for the little chains. I just lightly sanded these, and actually I forgot to sand them before I put them on the page. So I was very carefully trying to just distress them a little bit, because without sanding them, they didn't really match the rest of my page. Now this, you'll see the white really pop out as I'm sanding it here. When I hold it up close, wipe off some of that black ink. There you go. You can see that distressing. So it's up to you how much you want to distress it, how hard you want to go, but I think that looks really good. Just looks sort of worn in. Okay, there is one more variation that I want to show you, and I'm going to need black cardstock. I'm using my anti-static pouch because I'm going to heat emboss and I don't want the embossing sticking everywhere. So I'm gonna grab the 2 gear stamps that I told you about, those 2 different sizes. And I did make a custom mix for my embossing powder. So I have it sitting here. I actually need to find like a little jar to put this in because I made way too much. But I took black, silver, and gold. These are Ranger embossing powders. This one is a Michaels one, but doesn't matter. These are all fine embossing powders, super fine embossing powders. And you could see those are the 3 colors that I mixed together, and you could really tweak this. Like if you want it mostly black with just a little bit of metallic, then just measure accordingly. I just kind of dumped in, you know, see what we get sort of thing. So I'd say mine is probably equal parts black, gold, and silver. Now, of course, you can't put this back into your bottles because it will mix everything together. So you either need to have a separate container or make a very small amount so you don't feel bad about just chucking it out afterwards, whatever's left over. I like to do things in steps. So I did a whole bunch of heat embossing all at once when I was making embellishments for these pages. Same with die cutting, die cut a whole bunch all at once. All right, so I just stamped with Versamark. And now I'm going to take this over to my special powder mix that I created and just dump that on there. You can have a little spoon if you want to kind of help you put that up on there. So here is what that looks like. I'm hoping this will focus so you can actually see the 3 colors. In person, you can see the 3 colors. You can definitely see the gold, silver, and black shining through. Hopefully it translates on camera. Now, when you go to die cut these, there is a right way for the die to go for this big one. So I've went ahead and put my dies on a magnet. They don't come on a magnet, but that's how I like to store mine. So this little one, it doesn't seem to matter too much. You just line up the little spokes, and I always use washi tape to hold my dies in place. With this one, there's definitely a right way and a wrong way. So you need to rotate until you see that both the inside area, these ones, and the outside are lined up. Because if those are not lined up, you are not going to get a good cut. So you can see here, once it is actually lined up, all of it is showing the embossing through those little spokes and the outside part. And then just washi tape it in place and roll it through. You will need like a big shot or some sort of manual die cutting machine to get those to cut out. I'm going to show you a little sneaky peek of the 3rd layout because I want to point out these light bulbs while I'm here. These are using these 2 little light bulb dies. So I cut this solid one out of black. That's the little bit that you see up there. And then I cut this one out of the basic beige, which is the same color as the background. I wanted them to match because light bulbs are clear. And so if I made them white or something, it would look a little bit strange. So black, and then the basic beige. And then there is a little stamp in the stamp set that has the filament in it. I think that's what it's called. And then you just stamp that inside of there with black ink. And it makes the cutest little light bulbs. Now we'll have more of a look at this in a second, but before we move on, I want to give you some tips on how to do all that stamping in the background. So when I'm going to stamp on the background like I did here, what I like to do first is prepare my other pieces that are going on here. So that meant folding back this piece and ripping this piece and just placing them on my page so that I know exactly where they're going to be starting and ending, and then I can figure out where I want my stamping to be. If you don't do that, you could like copy what I do because I'm going to put exact measurements in the guide. But if you rip your paper differently than me, or maybe you fold at a slightly different spot, your measurements will be off. So it's better to just go ahead and prepare your pieces first and then go ahead and make a pencil mark on your page. So I'm just going to show you. Typically what I will do is just go ahead and use my T ruler, make a light pencil line because then it can always be erased. But that gives you a starting point to know kind of what's going to be hidden and what's going to be visible. And then I like to go ahead and mount all of my stamps onto blocks so that they are ready to go. I don't want to have to be stopping to think about this and, putting stamps on blocks and taking them off. So hopefully, if you have enough blocks where you can have one stamp on each block, it'll just make it so much easier. You can mix colors while you're doing this. I decided to keep it all one tone so that I could kind of keep it more in the background. I feel like once you start adding colors and having like different colors in this background stamping, it draws more attention to it and it makes it more of a focal point instead of a background feature. So I'm using Pecan Pie. it was the best match for my papers. And then here I have this line design. I like to start with some of my bigger things first. So depending on where you're starting, you could start with your circle. Actually, maybe that is what I'll do. I'll start with my circle first. And I'm gonna treat this side of my scrap paper like scrap. I always like to have some scrap paper on hand because I want to use a lighter ink. I wanna stamp off. So I'm gonna put my focal image on first. You can decide how far out or how far in you want it. And because this part is hidden, you could do your stamping just on your background piece like I'm showing here. And then we want to overlap our elements. And I also like to keep stamping so that, I don't even know if you guys can see that, you get a couple different shades. In person, you can see it. There is a lighter version there. And sometimes I find that just helps to blend it, make it a little bit lighter and not as stark. That's my same reason for stamping off too, is I just want it to kind of fade into the background a little bit. Then we have some splatter here. Don't be afraid to overlap your elements. We can definitely do that. It makes it a little bit more interesting, helps everything feel connected to each other. And this does not have to be perfect. In fact, you're kind of shooting for imperfection. This is like a little crosshatch design. And a lot of times, like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I just stamp one image and then see where I'm at. And then if I see, oh, I have kind of a blank spot, I want to fill that in. A splatter stamp is a go-to for me to fill in any areas where I'm maybe not as happy with. There's this cute little like X design. I actually put that inside my circle. But you could definitely do your own thing. You could play around with depth. You could add, let's say you want a little bit more pop. You could add some of your little speckles and splatter that are darker, some lighter, but it's all in the same tone of ink. I did go in with this big like splat image after the fact because I wanted something to fill in. I actually had a smudge right there, and so I was like, well, I want to hide that smudge. So then I went in after the fact and added it after I already had my title. And I would recommend, if you're creating these, go ahead and stamp your title first, because then you can get it perfectly centered the way you want it and do all these filler stamps after. And then I like to put things in 3 points, so that's why I have 3 of those. Now I don't have 3 circles, which to me it still works because they are sort of a focal point and they are diagonal from each other. So they were balancing each other out, and I didn't feel like I needed to have a third one. That's really all there is to creating this background stamping. Once you put your papers over top, it really adds that wow factor. One thing I should mention though, if you kind of don't estimate your spacing correct and your paper doesn't quite cover your pencil line, that's not so good, because once you put ink over top of the pencil, lots of times you're not able to erase it. So you might want to go very lightly with your line and put it slightly, farther right, like very slightly farther right than you think maybe you need to. And that way it will for sure be covered. Here is the third layout. I absolutely love how this one turned out. I love how all of them turned out, but this one I was a little bit more unsure of exactly how it was going to come together, and I just love it. So you can see here, I did bring in some colors in the background. So I did stamp off. I used Pretty Peacock, Secret Sea, and then the same Peacock Pie for my splatters and for that little line design. And I kept this a little bit more focused in areas. So you see here, I have 3 kind of points of stamping. And then over on this side, I have kind of more 2 points of stamping, but my stamping goes a lot farther. It's just kind of how it worked out. So my stamping kind of starts over here and goes this way. I'll show you that close up in a second. But I kept with the inking. So you can see I inked my base pages and I inked all of my individual pieces, my photo mats, everything got inked with the early Espresso. I like to use inking tools like this when I'm doing edges instead of a blending brush because I want to keep my ink closer to the edge. So I find that easier to do. I can also intensify it a little bit easier using one of these. And let's have a close-up look. There's that black cardstock die cut that I showed you before. And I layered these two together. I started out just with the chain link and I was like, it looks kind of lonely. It needs something else to kind of bulk it up. So I offset the pieces to different lengths to keep it kind of interesting and a little bit more rugged looking. And then here's where those light bulbs come in. I did use my T ruler and a black pen to draw the little line, and I absolutely love these. I could totally see doing like a girly version of these layouts by adding flowers, and I think those would look so good mixed in with some clusters of flowers. This one, I did actually work in some dimensionals. So I don't know if you noticed, the other layouts are completely flat. These ones I did bring in a few dimensionals here and there, just to add a little bit of interest. I felt like it was looking too flat. Here you could see I did the gold foil sanded with the black embossing powder over top again. A lot of the same treatments that we already did on the other gears. I'm just reusing the same techniques. But there's the left page. And then over here on the right page, I'll give you a close-up look at that stamping in the background. You can see it really draws your eye a little bit more, having some colors in there. But because I stamped them off first, so they're a lighter shade of ink, it doesn't take over. It still kind of sits in the background, but just has a little bit more of a pop to it. You can see all the gears, all those really cute Pentagon embellishments mixed in. They work perfectly because they have that metallic finish to them. And then down here at the bottom, we have my title section. This kind of turned into a very big embellishment cluster. We have these pieces over here and then all of the gears layered together. I purposely offset them because that's what you want. You want them kind of offset so they're not in a straight line. And then our light bulb over here, light bulbs over here. Once I got my papers down, that's when I stamped my title, and then I just worked the gears around the title. This is another new set. This is actually from the January online exclusives that are releasing this week. And I love this set because I like scrapbooking everyday life, and I'm gonna get so much use out of this, I think. So you have the big currently, and then you can pair it with any of the scripty words. So playing, learning, watching, celebrating, reading, life, making, loving. If you do any kind of daily life documenting, or you do like project life, those kinds of things, this is really great for that. And I thought currently loving is a great title. There's so many different things you could put in there. This could be pictures of like a little boy playing with his new toys that he loves, or doing a favorite hobby, or it could be pictures of a new car. It could be all kinds of things. I mean, with this theme, like the gears, the light bulbs, you could even document a trip to like a museum, like a science museum, or like an old car museum, things like that. I think there's lots of different ways that you could go with this. If you have ideas of how you would use these pages, go ahead and put them down in the comments because I would love to hear your ideas. And here's another quick look back at all 6 of the pages. Remember, you can click the see more down below the video if you want to get your hands on this guide. And then here is the first page. I did do some white embossing for the title. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. And I used this set, the Weekend Adventures. This one has been out for a little while, but I just love this title, and it can work with all kinds of things because all sorts of things can be an adventure. And then I also used the Love This. So this is Love This Place, and I just put a sticky note over the word place when I inked it up so that I could just use Love This. I felt like if I said Love This Place, it really narrowed down what I could use these pages for. But the Love This goes with pretty much anything. I hope you enjoyed seeing this new workshop. If you would like to see more of my previous workshops, you can click on this playlist here, and I will see you again soon with another video.